pleasure tonight to welcome and introduce Professor Dr. Frank Druffner. He studied art history and history in Stuttgart, München, and Paris, and received his PhD at the University of Munich. After that, he lectured at the Department of Art History at the University of Marburg, but then also served as exhibition curator at the State Museums in Stuttgart and then at the Schiller Nationalmuseum in Marburg. He then served as director's assistant at the German Literature Archive in Marburg until 2012, just a year ago, when he was promoted to head of the art collections of the German Literature Archive in Marburg, and also was nominated a professorship at the University of Marburg. Among his most important publications are Walter Scott's Romance and Stone, Abbotsford, a picturesque poet in residence, Thomas Becket and the Sanctuary of Canterbury Cathedral, and he is also the editor of Julie Domine, Love in Exile, which examines her letters to Erwin Walter-Palm. I would like to welcome Frank Druffner, who will talk about Max Beckmann today and a maybe not so well-known part of Max Beckmann's life and career, which is connected not only, as we always know and understand it, to the German left, but also to the German right. So, welcome, Frank Druffner. We are interested in hearing more about this.
Thank you very much for this warm welcome. Thank you for being together with me tonight. And thank you for the splendid organization of my stay here in St. Louis. It is an immense pleasure to come here to a place so intricately connected with the life and work of Max Beckmann. Today I have the pleasure of a guided tour of the Kemper Museum, although it is closed today, and a visit of the Art Museum. Compared to the Beckmann masterpieces in these collections, the painting which I will put into the center of my paper today is almost modest. A simple single-person portrait without, as it seems, any deeper symbolic meaning. Nevertheless, I think it can serve as an orientation mark in examining a very short but important period in Beckmann's life and work. To explain the somehow special relevance of my topic, it will be helpful to turn for a moment towards the institution of which I'm a member. The German Literature Archive is naturally concerned with the estates of writers from 1750 to the present days. Therefore, its holdings are, in the main part, flatware, as we call it a little bit disrespectfully. Handwritten manuscripts, letters, and diaries, as well as printed books, are difficult to show in exhibitions. Nevertheless, we have two museums doing just this, exhibiting literature, and we have developed a way to deal with the respective problems. But there are other holdings in Marburg besides this flatware. As we are collecting complete estates of authors, philosophers, writers, and scholars, we also possess a huge collection of photographs, portraits, sculptures, death masks, and even clothes, all connected with certain writers and German literary life. Therefore, I speak today to you partly as an archivist, what I'm not professionally, and partly as an art historian, what I am. Doing so in the proximity of all those important artworks, by being in the neighborhood of special significant works, it is a great pleasure. The Kemper Beckmann, four men around the table, is a testimony of a special and rather tragic aspect in the painter's biography. Beckmann, who came already under Nazi attack in 1930, when he was prominently present in the Venice Biennale, finally lost his Frankfurt professorship in April 1933. Frankfurt has been Nazi-dominated since 1913 because the Nazis were the second most important party in Hessen at that time from 1930 on. Finally, in 1937, when ideological fights about inadequate German art between different factions in the NSDAP ended with the victory of a non-expressionist, superficial, naturalistic and propagandistic style, he decided to emigrate to the Netherlands. Living in Amsterdam, he was examined by the Wehrmacht, however, and with the start of World War II, he tried to get a visa for the United States in vain. He had to stay in the Netherlands, which from 1940 until 1945 were occupied by German military, and only in 1947 succeeded in leaving Europe for America. The foreman of 1942-43, you all know much better than me, show 4 German immigrants in Amsterdam, among them Beckmann himself, on the lower right, each one equipped with a not easily readable attribute, and each of them rather isolated from the others. Sabine Eckmann has given a thorough analysis of this painting, on which I refer now. She could demonstrate very clearly that its style and color, the solitude of its protagonists, and the symbolic accessory reflect the frustrating experience of an exile which has turned into an existence in a country which became occupied by just the country all 4 had left. 2 of the 4 men symbolize the abstract and figurative trend in art, both clearly differing from Beckmann's own attitude as a creator of a transcendental world. Friedrich vor dem Berge Gildewald in the lower left corner, and Otto Herbert Fiedler above him. Gildewald was considered as an un-German painter and also was married to a Jewish wife, so he left Germany in 1938 with all good reasons. Fiedler, although painting in an undisputed naturalistic style, had chosen voluntary exile in 1933-34. Wolfgang Frommel, finally depicted in the upper right corner, was a philosopher who had been able to work as a conservative but non-National Socialist radio commentator who contempted the racial persecution of the Jews, was denounced and had to leave Germany in 1937. And in the lower right, as I said before, we see Beckmann himself. Compared to the Kemper's piece, the Marbach work, you see here, seems to be much more simple, a one-person portrait. It can, however, be considered as a key work of Beckmann's short Berlin period from 1933 to 37, not least because it can be contextualized by help of a number of written documents, which are part of the model's estate in Marbach. For Beckmann Sitter was a writer, almost forgotten today, but a best-selling author in the Weimar Republic, and once again for a short time, long after his death in 1937, namely after the war and in the early 1950s. When we got Binding's, that's the name of the man, Rudolf Georg Binding, when we got Binding's papers, I was immediately struck by a certain amount of written material showing Beckmann's characteristic handwriting and signature, and by the fact that not a few of them relate to the masterpiece that has been already in our archives' possession. So the picture came before the written material to us. Therefore, it became possible to reconstruct the painting's biography and to draw conclusions on the time of its coming into being. I hope not to bore you by citing a lot of this written material, but I would like to begin with one such example of archive-type typical flatware, an autograph entry in a special book you see here. I quote, I have translated all quotes in English. Quote, Berlin, 31st of May, 37. My dear Binding, the stimulating hours which I have enjoyed with you in the past will stay in my best memory, and I do hope that life will bring us some more of them. To your 70th birthday, I wish you all the best. In old friendship, your Max Beckmann. End quote. These words are at the very end of the relationship between Max Beckmann and Rudolf G. Winding, a relationship that covered 1.5 decades. In the course of time, it developed from a superficial acquaintanceship into something very close to real friendship. When Winding, on the occasion of his 70th birthday, on 13th of August 1937, finally received this book of friends, he discovered among a huge number of handwritten congratulations, by Gerhard Hauptmann for example, also Beckmann's entry. The painter himself was no longer in Germany then, as we have heard before. The lines in favor of Winding were among the last written words by Beckmann in his homeland. It seems that there was no further contact between the two of them before Winding died 1 year later on 1st of August 1930. It goes without saying that the most impressive document of the inter-artistic relationship between writer and painter, sitter and painter, is Winding's portrait by Max Beckmann. It was donated to the archive by Winding's own son, Enzian, in 2002, long before the literary papers came there too, in 2007, after Enzian's death. You can't sell your father, he said, when asked after the price for the picture. And in the end, completely uncomplicated, donated it and handed it over to our driver in Basel. Beckmann, so that's the written material of the estate of Winding, in which the letters between him and Beckmann are included. Beckmann painted the poet in oil on canvas and put his family name and the date 1935 in the lower left corner. He painted a knee-length portrait of Winding, who is slightly turned to the left and therefore doesn't catch the beholder's eye. In the lowered left hand, he holds an open book, from which he seems to recite, given the declamatory gesture of the elevated right. The mouth, however, is closed. The model wears a three-part suit with a white shirt and a bow tie. The back of a chair and a fragment of a framed picture on the left, as well as a door or window frame and flowers, bird of paradise presumably, on the right, are indicators of a private ambience. Winding's figure, which almost completely fits the canvas, and its simple statuary form, let the picture's format seem much bigger than it really is. The canvas is only 95 centimeters high and 70 centimeters broad. Beckmann made use of an effective color scheme. The light blue background is divided by the bold dark stripes outlining the set accessories. Set against this backdrop and further accentuated by the bright colors of the flowers is the dark blue suit. The artist's special care, however, is directed towards the rendering of the head and the physiognomy. Skin color and ochre receive unexpected turquoise highlights. Beckmann applied the colors rather thinly so that the structure of the canvas is still visible, only in a few parts the color is bestows. As I said before, we are lucky in possessing formerly unpublished handwritten material in Winding's estate that allows us to reconstruct the genesis and the context of his portrait. In the following passages, I put these informations in the framework of the artistic relationship between painter and sitter. A relationship which indicates some interesting and very unexpected aspects of Beckmann's early years. Binding, the sitter, was not a complete stranger to Beckmann in 1935. An early encounter, the earliest one we can deduct, must have taken place in the early 1920s, when in the Frankfurt house of Heinrich Simon, the chief editor and co-owner of the Frankfurter Zeitung, the predecessor of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung today, an illustrious circle was set up which met regularly. Simon had established a Friday lunch table that had the character of a veritable salon where men of the Frankfurt Cultural Society met. Among them was museum director Georg Swarzensky, the father of Hans Swarzensky, the famous art historian working in America, art historian Wilhelm Hausenstein, writer Casimir Edschmidt, the actor Heinrich George, and Rudolf G. Binding, together with Max Beckmann, both living at the period near or in Frankfurt. An eyewitness account of these meetings is a description of Binding, which may be read with a view on the later painting. I quote, "Ranking highest among the group was a tall, elegantly and decidedly carefully dressed, stiff-legged, slim, slightly Saxon accent-speaking gentleman with bow tie and monocle. He appeared distinguished, somehow out of time. His language was extremely select, circuitous, and slow. His amphoric voice didn't match the amazingly outspoken and funny things he then and now was uttering. When speaking, his turbid blue eyes, surmounted by huge, antlers-like brows, were moving around the circle as if overlooking a manege. He was the man who had written the Riding Rules for a Beloved, one of the titles of Binding books, and he was expecting all but the fact that this cavalier with the punished face was the poet Rudolf G. Binding." End of quote. Another occasion when the two men must have met was the annual meeting of the International Association for Cultural Cooperation in Vienna in October 1926, where both had been delegates. As only 6 German members participated, one may assume personal contacts among the small group. Their respective correspondence, however, doesn't mention the other. A photograph of the German committee of the association shows Binding in the first row on the far right, and together with Lili von Schnitzler in the middle center left from the man with the light hat, one of Beckmann's most important patrons, of whom we will hear again later, beside the Prince of Rouen, founder of the association. Beckmann himself, unfortunately, is concealed on the right, at the very right end. You only see one hat, but that must be Beckmann, as is documented by the participants of this meeting. It's interesting that Beckmann as well as Binding were members of this Association for Cultural Cooperation, because this was a rather conservative enterprise. The Prince of Rouen was longing for a conservative elite d'esprit by recatholizing the whole of Europe. He counted on an alliance of intellectual, economic and financial elite in creating a new hierarchic social order following the example of Italian fascism. His anti-liberal, even anti-democratic movement, however, didn't succeed in getting support by the Nazis, considering themselves as expressly nationalist and anti-elitist. The first time when Binding mentioned Beckmann explicitly was shortly before 1932, when he was collecting material for his reflections Mirror Talks, Spiegelgespräche, published in the same year. In his notebooks he deals with the Causa Beckmann, der Fall Beckmann. For him, this painter was, I quote, the strong one who overstrains himself, whose creations are acts of violence, who tames forms into their most powerful by his strength, and who tries to do this again and again by means of the mirror." End of quote. Here, Binding is clearly referring to Beckmann's self-portraits. In the printed version of the Mirror Talks, the passages on Beckmann don't occur. Maybe they were considered as inopportune when the artist was already under attack by Nazi critics. But there is one paragraph in the printed version dealing with painters who, like Rembrandt, don't surrender to the dictatorship of the image over the prototype. This certainly is also true of Beckmann, as seen by Binding. Binding must have known Beckmann's works from the Frankfurt museums and must have heard of the painter's success at the Biennale in Venice. Furthermore, Beckmann had received the Reichsehrenpreis Deutscher Kunst honorary award of the German Reich for German art in 1928, so he was a prominent figure in the Frankfurt society. After Beckmann had lost his professorship at the Frankfurt Art School at the Städel and left Frankfurt for Berlin, the contact with Binding must somehow have intensified. There exists a drawing by Beckmann depicting Binding's portrait dated as early as October 1934, you see on the right. This sheet already demonstrates Beckmann's interest in the poet's physiognomy and seems to prepare the painting, of which Binding only speaks in the following year. Paint splatters on the drawing show that it was used by Beckmann while working on the oil version. There are no written accounts of a meeting in 1934, but Binding was evidently in Berlin at that time because he became deputy chairman of the German Academy of Poetry. This is also very interesting because this academy, this part of the academy, has been gleichgeschaltet in 1933. That is, it was politically controlled by the Nazis. Suspect members, politically, racially, or conceptually suspect, had been expelled and substituted by such writers who were prepared to declare officially their loyalty towards Hitler. This shows Binding's political inclinations, which were strongly conservative and nationalist, whereas he never became a party member. Due to his office in the academy, Binding, who was living as the mayor of a small garden city near Frankfurt, had regularly to travel to Berlin for sessions. He also did so in the spring of 1935. And during this day, on the 19th of May, he speaks of his first visit to Beckmann's studio. I quote, "This morning I went to Max Beckmann. Finished on an easel in the middle of his studio, which has the aspect of a battlefield, and where the colors bespatter the only armchair, stands a big painting. An actor in shirt sleeves and housecoat, red-faced and swell-headed as if bursting, is learning a role. A young woman, his wife, delicate, exiguous and blonde, reads the role he's rehearsing from a book. Nearby, the two children, only partly involved, and an upright sitting black dog seen from behind. As color very beautiful. Very strong and intense, therefore, for me, beautiful." What Binding is describing here is this painting of the famous actor Heinrich Georgi, who also took part in the meetings at Heinrich Simons in Frankfurt, as we have heard before. I further quote Binding. "So, he wants to paint me. The head had raised his interest long before. He says, 'You are very brave to let you paint it by me.' I say to myself, however, that I don't run any risk. Why? Well, because the others he may execute. Because that's simply the result they deserve. I think, when I will not get away, I won't look different than the others. Cost 1,500 Reichsmark. Minor point for me. The affair will be attempted." shall start in June. Probably there will be an academy session anyway. He understands what I want. End of quote. He wants to paint me. This sentence is also documented by another of Beckmann's sitters, who recalls the painter's short and threatening declaration, quote, "I want to paint you, appear in my studio next week," end quote. The painter's desire was answered positively by Binding. A first sitting was scheduled for June, but Binding must have asked for a change, as this postcard, this letter by Max Beckmann testifies. That's second and third page. I quote from the first page. Quote, "My dear Binding, thanks for your friendly lines. It suits me also at the beginning of July, but you don't need to be in action uninterruptedly and can do other things while I will be at work. Please bring also some photographs of yourselves. I may use them occasionally for control. I'm very much looking forward to the work. However, it would be good if you really could come at the beginning of July. So, goodbye, your Beckmann." End of quote. On the 4th of July, work in the studio began, as is documented by a letter written by Binding to his lover, Elisabeth Jungmann. I quote, "Changing and hurrying to Beckmann. He needs me to learn me by heart. Today the first sitting took place at Beckmann's. During 1 hour, he was drawing an astonishingly secure image of my head, almost en face. Thereafter studies of my hands. Tomorrow then he wants to start painting, but without me. On Saturday I will come home again." End of quote. The drawing Binding refers to may be the one that was on sale in a Berlin gallery in 1997. It shows the upper part of the body in reduced lines, whereas the head is pretty well executed. Photographs were sent to Beckmann as well. I show one of our photographic collection. And on the 6th of July, work proceeded. Binding informed his ex-wife, divorce was effective since June, as well as his lover and new partner, Elisabeth Jungmann, about progress. To his wife, he wrote that he had first to attend, I quote, "a convention of some like-minded men at Hans Grimm's in Lippoldsberg." This needs a short explanation. The so-called poet meetings at Lippoldsberg were a right-wing enterprise, a gathering of writers and poets in Hans Grimm's, a notorious right-wing author's residence in an old monastery in Hessen. Grimm was the author of a book with the notorious title Volk ohne Raum, People Without Space, that became an important Nazi motto for expansionist policy. So here again we have a proof of Binding's political or ideological trend. He was völkisch, as is called in Germany. Following this convention, and I quote Binding again, "I had a few things to do here in Berlin, but would be already back home if not Beckmann's painting me. This will take some more days until he has learned me by heart. Of course, I'm very excited about how the picture will look. In any case, I fancy myself as looking different than Carola Netter or a child of Käthe Rappaport, and therefore as becoming a different painting." End of quote. Here again, Binding indicates a certain familiarity with Beckmann's work, for his mentioning portraits which have been painted in the 1920s, depicting women of the Frankfurt high society. I show just one as an example with the Carola Netter on the right side, Mrs. Watzensky on the left. It seems that Binding had a keen interest in the painter in these early days. These portraits seem indeed, compared with Beckmann's later works, a little bit colorless and lame, and this may be the reason why Binding contrasts his own face with that of the earlier female sitters. The uncertainty how the painter would interpret himself Whether he really would like different than these earlier models is also a topic in a letter to Jungmann, written about the same time. Quote, "Today from 12 until 2, keeping still for Beckmann, who painted that it creaked, that is to say he's still drawing and catched fire. He reads my autobiography and asks for poems. What do you say? He's efficient. Now I'm curious whether I will look as blank as the frivolous ones who in earlier years were executed by his unrelenting eye. But here I am and he holds me. He demands another gathering on Tuesday evening and the last sitting on Saturday. That means I shall stay here one more week. I'm deeply shocked, don't show it, and cannot run the risk to turn the whole thing into the unfinished symphony." End of quote. Binding tried to excuse the delay of his returning home by adding a postcard of the same day, writing the words, well, "The portrait, says Beckmann, will be fine. Great," he says. End of quote. So Binding considered his portrait as too important to endanger its perfection by mere time pressure. He made a deal with the director of his harborage in Berlin, as he called the famous Hotel Adler, the first place in the city, with some understatement, so that he didn't need to change places. Nevertheless, he was longing for an earlier return. Wrote, "If Beckmann, whom I'll meet tomorrow evening, has been hardworking in the meantime, I may arrange with him an earlier return." End of quote. The sittings in the studio continued, however. Impatiently, he wrote to Jungmann on 11th of July, wrote, "Will be at Max's tomorrow afternoon. The picture shall be good. It's uncomfortable not knowing whether you are still on the palette or already on the canvas." End of quote. Evidently, Beckmann succeeded in conveying the painting to the canvas for the last one, sent a telegram the next day, "Painting marvelous, arriving tomorrow early train." Shortly after his return, Binding paid for his portrait, as is shown by the typewritten copy of a lost manuscript letter. Wrote, "Dear Master Beckmann, enclosed you find the representational fee with and in form of 1,500 marks. Let me say that I have the feeling of not only possessing a very good picture, but also of having done a good stroke of business. Moreover, I spent good hours in your and your wife's company, and we haven't bored ourselves. That is something, as is well known. So I give you my regards and my thanks as your recent and satisfied victim, affectionately, Binding." My regards to the spouse. The poems will arrive tomorrow. End of quote. It seems that Beckmann forgot to answer this letter. Very uncomfortable for a German who didn't get an answer after sending a check to somebody. So Binding, the accurate German World War I officer, was alarmed and asked him for a reply. I quote, "Dear Master Beckmann, I'm not a little worried that you didn't receive my registered letter with a check about 1,500 marks, because you haven't acknowledged its receipt. Would you be so kind and do this for my reassurance? I know well that you are not attached to writing, but I would appreciate to know that the letter is in your hands. Today I was speaking to Swarzensky, who is very much looking forward to seeing the painting and already asked for photographs of it. It is true that a good shot should be made immediately on the spot. You probably know a good photographer anyway, and therefore I ask you to cost this on my cost and send me some copies. Best regards, Binding." We really have these photos of the early, just finished painting in Mara. Beckmann could calm Binding by his return mail, which reads as follows. Wrote, "Friday. My dear Binding, many thanks for the consignment of the check about 1,500 marks. These days your poems have arrived also, to my special pleasure. I have already read a lot. The war poems made a special impression on me. Both of them have been in the First World War. For the both of us," Beckmann and his wife, It has been a great pleasure to have had you with us now and then, and to get acquainted with you more profoundly. It's kind of remarkable that one often passes somebody for years, only to get in closer touch at the end. I have had a look on your portrait again, and I must say that I'm quite satisfied. As far as it is possible to compress a part of the enormous manifoldness of a human being in a portrait, I at least succeeded in doing something in this direction. So far, so good. But the following sentence seems most unexpected in a letter by Beckmann, even if the alarming naming it is misspelled. I continue with the quote. Today a Lord and Lady Daventer, the name is unreadable, will come to me through the medium of Ribbentrop, and I'm happy that I can show them, among other things, your portrait. Well then, good luck in Switzerland, and see you definitely in October, your Beckmanns. End of quote. Ribbentrop. There is nobody of this name in the literature on Berlin in the 1930s, but everybody knows the name of Joachim von Ribbentrop. Hitler's advisor in external affairs, and since June 1935, ambassador extraordinary to the United Kingdom. His contacts with the British aristocracy are well known, and therefore it seems more than probable that Max Beckmann, an ostracized and, according to the official judgment, degenerated artist, received studio guests at the special instigation of one of the leading Nazis. A letter by Binding not only supports this theory, but makes clear that Beckmann has met Ribbentrop in person at least once. Already in February 1935, Binding has written to Jungmann about a special evening in Berlin, and I quote, Schnitzi was very kind. The society very stimulating because of the presence of some men. She understands to host. Beckmann with wife, the very elegant paralyzed Baron Simulin, Prince August Wilhelm, Dr. Hanfstengel, director of the National Gallery, Baron Pechmann, director of the State Manufacture of Porcelain, and the Ribbentrops, husband and wife. We all then had chicken soup in a noisy dance hall. End of quote. This letter depicts an assembly of persons far more spooky than in one of Beckmann's own paintings. Let us dwell on this convention a little longer to grasp its full meaning. The whole company of this memorable soiree can be divided into two factions, culture and politics. Somehow symbolized is this grouping in the person of the host of the evening. The real person behind the nickname Schnitzi is Lily von Schnitzler Mallinckrodt, born Mallinckrodt. The name is not unknown in St. Louis, I think, and not on the campus here. She became one of the main patrons of Beckmann after she acquired his first work in 1924. When asked by her husband for a birthday or Christmas present, she said he shouldn't worry about, but simply buy her a Beckmann painting. In the end, she owned 21. She was a member of Oran's European Association, of which we have heard already, and therefore well connected with different literates, artists, and scientists, among them also Binding. Even her marriage to Georg von Schnitzler on the right side, here in a photograph as a war criminal after 1945, even her marriage to Georg von Schnitzler didn't stop her commitment to modern art. Schnitzler has been a member of the board of directors of the notorious IG Farben, which helped financing the NSDAP in 1933. In 1934, Schnitzler became a member of the SA. In 1938, he joined Hitler's party. After the war, he was imprisoned because the IG Farben exploited French and Polish companies to secure the predominance of the own enterprise in Europe. The Schnitzler couple moved in the highest circles of the new Nazi regime, but Lily did not abandon her old friends. Even after his emigration, she kept in touch with Beckmann, when after she had tried to recommend him to Goebbels as a true genius, in vain. In her Berlin home, close to Beckmann's own apartment, the walls were covered with his paintings. The largest of them could be hidden behind a curtain in the background here, if political guests were called. Beckmann was well aware of his patron's importance for his existence. Nevertheless, he considered her husband somehow suspicious. In 1935, he was invited to the Schnitzler's secondary seat in Frankfurt. Being in Baden-Baden at the time for health treatment, he wrote to his wife that he possibly could not avoid the Frankfurt thing, hinting obviously at that invitation. Quote, "It would be simply impolite, and you know well what she means for us. It's not especially agreeable for me, because her husband will also be present, but if needs must." End of quote. Beckmann tried from the beginning of acid criticism in Frankfurt, where the NSDAP became the second strongest party in 1930, to deal with the Nazi hostility towards his art in a passive, observant way. Already in 1930, he urged a friend, quote, "to teach the Nazis that I'm a German painter. There was already an attack on me in the Völkischer Beobachter on Wednesday." End quote. And at the beginning of 1934, we read, quote, "Time will come when I will be treated with justice. I consider a slow and quiet process of growing into the time for better, without abandoning something of one's personal belief." End of quote. This seemed to be the reason why Beckmann didn't hesitate to communicate with politically rather suspected people. Before introducing those of them who participated in that singular evening meeting in 1935, and then considering the special motivations of Beckmann and Binding respectively to get in closer touch with them, I would like to turn to the other protagonists from the cultural sector. Comparable with Lili von Schnitzler was Baron Simolin, a Romanist and art collector. He was a remote relative of Beckmann's wife and has been their groomsman. He bought paintings and corresponded with Beckmann about art and aesthetics, and was another important benefactor of the couple. Baron Pechmann on the right, on the other side, was not closely linked to Beckmann, but had an interest in fighting for modernity. As a former theorist of design and craftsmanship, he became director of the Porzellanmanufaktur Berlin in 1929. There, he realized the principles of the German Werkbund, form without ornament, by developing the serial production of high-quality porcelain for everyday use. He was highly successful and managed to reconstruct the finances of the company. Nevertheless, as an advocate of modernism, he had to give up his position in 1938 under pressure by the Nazis. He subsequently retired to his family seat, far removed from Berlin. Eberhard Hanfstengel, here on the left, became director of the National Gallery in Berlin in 1933. There, he had to remove expressionist portraits and substitute them by landscapes or still lifes, at least by the same artists. He still continued to acquire paintings by Nolde, Kirchner and Schmidt-Rottluff, but in 1935 the first confiscations of artworks in his museum took place. With things getting worse, Hanfstengel refused to cooperate in the preparation of an exhibition on degenerate art and was put on leave in 1937. While Schnitzler, Simolin, Pechmann and Hanfstengel represented an open-minded public with a taste for modern trends in the arts, the two other participants in the soiree were outright Nazis. Ribbentrop has already been mentioned. He is shown in the right photograph, together with his wife. With him, we really touch the inner circle of the Hitler regime. Finally, Prince August Wilhelm on the left, the son of the Kaiser, became Nazi through his membership in the Stahlhelm, a nationalist veterans association. In 1930, he joined the NSDAP in 1933, the SS. He also became Russian state councillor and member of the Reichstag. At the beginning of the 30s, the prince was exploited by the government as a lure for electors. Since August Wilhelm was interested in the arts and a skilled craftsman, Schnitzler's invitation may have been extended with some consideration. It is interesting to note that Binding as well as Beckmann were in a precarious situation when they took part in the aforementioned meeting. Beckmann, as we have heard, tried to grow slowly into the new time. It seems that he counted on a certain positive development. Already in January 1934, he advised the gallery owner Franke to refrain from staging an exhibition of his works. I quote, "It doesn't make any sense to put the whole story up too early for discussion. We should wait one more year." And then he adds some rather mysterious words, quote, "Otherwise it could put an end to different, very favorable things, which still are underway, and that would be a great pity. I simply overlook things more precisely, and am of good cheer and very well informed." End of quote. Unfortunately, we are not able to go into further detail because of a lack of more written evidence. We don't really know what Beckmann is hinting here at. There were other German artists of the same time who also tried to make the best of the new circumstances. May it suffice to mention a few of them. Emil Nolde and Franz Radziwiłł became party members in 1933, but nevertheless figured prominently in the exhibition Degenerated Art. For some time after the rise of the Nazis, Nolde's Nordic expressionism was in high favor with Goebbels, and for a short while it seemed to become a kind of official German art. But in the end it was Alfred Rosenberg, Goebbels' rival, who succeeded in enforcing superficial naturalism as the adequate style of the movement. Oskar Schlemmer, teacher at the Bauhaus, wrote letters to Goebbels and other politicians affirming, quote, "that I am feeling pure and my art completely in concord with National Socialist principles, namely heroic, steely, romantic, unsentimental, hard, fierce, type creating." End of quote. In the end, nevertheless, it shows the inner emigration. Even Mies van der Rohe and Walter Gropius tried to present their new style architecture as the apt way of Nazi building, decorating their purely modernist plans simply with swastika flags. To conclude this digression, I may mention an article by our American colleague James Van Dyke, who convincingly demonstrated that also Ernst Barlach and his work were situated, I quote, "in a network of personal relationships and a discursive field in which modernism and nationalism were not irreconcilable." End of quote. These words can be fully applied to Beckmann as well. Van Dyck states that Beckmann, quote, "consorted for whatever reasons with the group of elitist and cosmopolitan admirers of fascism led by Karl Anton von Rohan." End of quote. We have heard of this. Lili von Schnitzler may have been the driving force behind Beckmann's decision to join the Rohan Circle, the association, but his self-assessment as a German artist was also of some consequence without ripening into a true political concept. Beckmann was unpolitical. This was shown by you in your paper as well, that he is not very deeply in politics. Ms. Ekman quotes the artist himself, who in 1938, after his emigration, said that, I quote, "painting is a very difficult thing. It absorbs the whole man, body and soul. Thus I have passed blindly many things that belong to real and political life." End of quote. Beckmann wanted simply to continue painting when he tried to get protection by important persons like Lili von Schnitzler or even Rubenstorff. Perhaps he considered Binding also as an important agent, as a member of the conservative elite who may have been able to put in a good word for him in higher circles. But here he was completely wrong. because Binding himself had some serious, even dangerous problems at the time when his portrait was painted by Beckmann. Binding was nationalist and conservative, but never joined the NSDAP. A cavalry captain in the First World War, he had a distinct feeling for taste and character, and considered most of the party members as rebel, noisy, and uneducated. Nevertheless, in 1933, he wrote his Answer of Germany to the World, defending National Socialist Germany against foreign opponents. In October of the same year, his name appeared on a list of 88 writers who vowed devoted loyalty to Adolf Hitler. He has never been asked to sign this list, but a year later, he accepted his inclusion by officially stating that he has too much campaigned for the new time, that his loyalty would come as a surprise. Widely considered as an elitist and bourgeois writer, his position was by no means untouchable. At the beginning of the year 1935, he was anonymously informed that the Gestapo knew that his partner, Elisabeth Jungmann, was a Jew. In the estate, there are letters to high officials dealing with this topic and a whole file labeled Gestapo. In November, the president of the Reichsstiftungskammer, responsible for all literary activities in the Reich, wrote to Binding that the Gestapo has informed him about his employing a Jewish secretary and asked whether this is still true. Binding stayed with Jungmann, but subsequently moved to Starnberg in Bavaria, avoiding the big cities of Frankfurt and Berlin, and so the Nazi centers. This was what may be called a kind of inner emigration as a counterpart to Beckmann's real emigration to a foreign country. The move into seclusion was further enhanced on the side of Binding by a second episode that put him into danger. On June the 6th, 1935, Thomas Mann turned 60, and Binding, completely misjudging the official Germany's attitude towards the emigre who had left Germany in 1933, voted for a tribute to Mann by the German Academy of Poetry. At the end of May, he received a letter by the Minister of the Interior complaining about this plan. According to the ministry, Mann was, I quote, the typical exponent of an epoch overrun by the National Socialist Revolution. His works are considered as insignificant for the Third Reich, the goals of the Führer, and the cultural policy started in 1933. Obviously, also Binding had passed blindly many things that belong to real and political life, as Beckmann will put it in 1938. He was not fully aware of the seriousness of National Socialist policy. Maybe that Binding himself would have been faded into an exponent of a bygone epoch if he had lived much longer, like Mann. He remains a person difficult to judge in terms of his position towards real policy and its consequences. But he fits very well into the multifaceted picture of early Nazi Berlin, where almost every artist tried to secure his own domain by all possible means, including any compromise with the regime. Such a compromise would have done even Beckmann, it seems. I come to an end. We do not know whether Ribbentrop's distinguished British guests ever visited Beckmann's studio. In any case, Binding's portrait was still there in August 1935 when Simolin saw it. Binding seems to have received the painting in autumn that year, already living in Starnberg. During the Second World War, the portrait remained in Bavaria. Enzian Binding, the son, only got it found it in a Munich attic after 1945, when it was returned to him. The portrait of his father, which he wouldn't sold but donated, is the undisputed centerpiece of our art collection in Marbach, but it is intricately interconnected with the city's literary estate. I've tried to demonstrate in my papers. Thank you very much.
Was Beckmann related to Roy Henry?
Yes, that's the same dynasty.
And Hans Grimm was related to Benton of the Protestant family?
No, no, as far as I know.
Yeah, thank you very much for this excellent lecture. As far as the anthropological background is concerned, the connection of building to Prince Roy is highly interesting and indicative. The thing is that Roy was a Europeanist, but of a very strange kind of, in his intellectual colors, I would say. His closeness to fascism, as you indicated, also led him in 1933 in his Europäische Revue, that was the periodical that he published for his circle, his group, a group competing, by the way, with Bruno Beckmanns, who was on the other side. That in 1933, when Hitler came to power, Prince Roy wrote a congratulatory letter to Hitler. And this was somewhat contradicting, because on the one hand, Hitler was a Europeanist, although very conservative, with a leaning towards Italian fascism, not really conventional socialism, including anti-Semitism and so on. So we have, this interesting relationship here. Pippin, you said, was a nationalist on one hand, but on the other hand, he was part of the Prince Roy group. By the way, in the photo that you showed, Hofmannsthal was also part of that, he's in the very center of the picture. And Hofmannsthal, with his conservative revolution, fit very well in it. And I think Binding is very similar to these people in the conservative revolution. They go as far as they can along with a certain conservative image of the National Socialists until they have to realize that their conservatism and the kind of anti-human reactionary right-wing thing of the Nazis cannot come together.
Yes.
And this is exactly what all of these people experienced. Prince Roy's movement was then closed by the Nazis, and he himself, he saved his skin by becoming the representative of the German hotel business. So this whole movement was crashed. And I think that Binding, what did you say when Binding died?
1938.
1938, yeah. Binding probably would have experienced, that he either would have to go into immigration, like other people did, or that he would really have been ousted and incarcerated or something like that. We cannot predict. But the fate of that particular right-wing, so-called conservative revolution people, they were crushed by Nazis. And there was, in the end, there was no way to bring them together. But it's very interesting, I think, what you pointed out. 1935 is the year, and they're still trying to do that. They haven't really understood what Nazism is about, and many people didn't, then this kind of contradiction comes out, and it's highly interesting in-between figure.
I just wanted to maybe add one thing, because the case of Beckmann, I think, is a little bit more complicated, because he obviously was also feeling very close to the European movement, but then he did go into exile, and then in exile, though, he did continue having relationships with very conservative or even Nazis. Louis von Schnitzer came to Amsterdam several times and bought paintings. And then Beckmann's closest friend and dealer was actually Druffner, who at the same time confiscated art for the National Socialists. So there was this kind of commercial involvement with several Nazis during exile, which I think made life after 1945 pretty difficult for Max Beckmann. He also, he was very contradictory. He also did paint the collection of Jewish people in Amsterdam before they were transported to the concentration camps. So, and at the same time, this was paid by somebody in Frankfurt. So it's very contradictory. It's everything but black and white. So
Yeah.
it's, you know, so.
The time was
Makes it
very
very
contradictory, and
right.
people tried to get into it in contradictory ways.
And once he arrived at the United States, which is interesting too, he started to depict himself several times as Faust, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, and showing Mephistopheles as sort of Nazi Germany or
That's
something
why I
like
said
that.
in meiner Brust.
Right, right,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
So, did he have no conviction, and whoever paid him, that's what he did?
Good question. Good question. Difficult to answer. I don't know.
Well, in a way, it was, he really, I think, James said it, he was very much invested in his art. And,
Yes.
he
And that was his
basically did
business.
everything
He had to live on his art.
right,
and-
with, you know, what helped him to be able to be an artist and didn't care so much, obviously didn't, where, you know, the financial support for that endeavor came from. Took it from, you know, Jewish exiles as he did take it from Nazis. So at the same time, very difficult situation.
I was wondering about the status of the style amongst links to this really almost sort of expressionism of Amroda, but also Bottom. Where did he stand? He was a degenerate artist.
He was degenerated,
But,
and he never. I think he never was in discussion as an official exponent of this kind of Nordic expressionism. I didn't come across his name in this discussion.
Oh, you were not considered an
Yes,
expressionist?
I asked myself.
Beckmann was not part of the expressionists.
Yeah.
So he always had this kind of outsider
Outside,
status.
yeah.
But there seems to be links to Germany with kind of this national traditions.
From the other ones, yes.
Well, yeah.
So much.
But Mildred did definitely, and Barlach did, so
Yeah.
that was this kind of recuperation.
No, there was a Nazi,
German
but Barlach was not. But
Right.
also his art was discussed as a possible way of future development.
Do you have any idea what the painting on the wall is?
There was a long discussion about this. Hinding Sun said it's a finding. 2D. I couldn't verify. It's not very easy. Perhaps it may be a lost drawing by finding, but I really don't know whether it is or not.
Yeah, you mentioned that Beckmann was paid 1,500 marks for this painting.
Yes.
How did that compare with the other amounts you received in the 30s?
Can't answer, sorry. I didn't go with this. It's not a very big painting, so I think it's a medium price. But I don't know. I can't answer.
I mean, following up on this question, I'm wondering, and I don't know that much about Beckmann, but obviously there's a lot of Beckmann portraits of others, society figures. So what was the role of this kind of portraiture in his work? I mean, was it merely to earn money? Although he appears to actually have approached Binding, if I understood you correctly. So, but he still has to pay for it.
Yeah, sure, it was a
So,
commission, yes.
I mean, a lot of the artists I work on don't actually make, I work on French, modern, Matisse.
Mhm.
They didn't make portraits.
Mhm.
So was it just something common? I mean, I don't know, I'm just curious about what role portraiture played in his larger practice.
Well, I think portraits have always been this part of painting, which brought money. That was commission, that was on the safe side. Independently of galleries, independently of a person who earn money by gilding. So has always been important, and especially important in a time when he couldn't go on exhibitions from 1930 or 33. So a private policy in working and painting. That's my opinion.
But and just to add that it's interesting, I didn't know about Matisse and the French, because Otto Dix, for example, too, in the 1920s, he was not in trouble at that time or something. He did take commissions, you know, by his doctor, by other intellectuals, so it was definitely, you know, something where it was continuing at the time, nothing so special. No.
Yeah, that would be my question. There was no commission. It was owned by himself.
And it came to us from Kurt Valentin. Kurt Valentin was his, you know, most important dealer in the United States, and before that, also very, very complicated figure. And before that, he was represented by Buchholz, you know, and Valentin opened Buchholz Gallery here, and he sold it to Washington University in 1946.